Hi Year 10, thanks for those who are sending me examples of your writing, I really appreciate it. I really wanted to do a Zoom lesson with you, and I don't think I'm going to be able to fit one in. I think that you're just in school so much over the next 2 weeks that I'm really going to struggle until perhaps Wednesday of the last week, which isn't really an English day. I was going to do feedback via a Zoom lesson, so it was a bit more interactive, but keep me posted. If you really would like to do that, then I'll look into it. But if not, this is your third from final Show My Homework lesson. So the end is near. Okay, so today we are going to move on to look at articles. So we've had a look at letters and we've had a look at speeches. And there's three kind of key things we're going to focus on in this lesson, and that's responding to the question, because it is slightly different with articles. How to become a journalist, because I want you to have a really professional voice in your articles. It's going to help you to get on 5, and also how to open your article as well. I also still do want to teach you tone, and how to vary tone, and how to be funny and angry, etc. So that will be coming your way next week. Okay, so just to highlight that there are already many skills that I've taught you that you would use in an article. So how to plan your response to a question from Monday's lesson, as well as being applicable to letters, is absolutely applicable to articles. You're going to develop an argument in your article, as many as you can. So again, that's what we did on Tuesday when we looked at letters. You're going to be using pathos, logos and ethos, which we've done many times, and also you're going to be using your rhetorical features and your persuasive language, and again, we've done that loads of times. So the only real difference between your letter and your article is obviously that your article is going to be read by a much broader range of people, and the key difference between a speech and an article is that obviously you've not got that live delivery. You don't really know who's going to read it, and you don't know when they're going to read it. But otherwise, literally all of your writing skills are the same. Okay, as long as you keep that logical fact in your head that you're writing an article and you have no idea who will read it and when. Not no idea who will read it, obviously it depends on the publication. Okay, so just to recap then, this is a screenshot of that format in rhetoric, different formats for rhetoric that I gave you, that double-sided sheet that I keep going on about. And just a summary really, just to remind you, you've got this already. So you're going to have your headline, you can write written by and make up a name if you want to. You've got your date, stand first. I'm going to go through that in a bit more detail later on. You've already got this written down, please don't write it, but just to stress that these 3 skills are the skills I'm kind of want to emphasize to you today. I feel like the rest is pretty standard. Skill 8 I'm going to come on to in a minute. So being a journalist, you're an expert, you've got to have a confident voice. People, I know that now anyone can write a blog. Just go to WordPress, start a website, write a blog. I recommend you do in a safe way, because it's a good way to practice writing, and it can be a nice way of getting your opinions and views out into the world. But most articles are still written by professional journalists, and if you can adopt that professional tone, then you're going to help to get yourself on 5. Entertaining language that you used in your reviews, like those, fun similes and, creative language. We're going to look at that a bit more when we look at tone. And then please, I just wanted to stress, write it somewhere in massive letters. Do not use tomorrow, today, or yesterday in an article. It will indicate to the examiner straight away that you don't understand what an article is, and therefore they're not going to be looking at putting you in the top bands. Okay, or very unlikely to. All right, so you have got that already, so if you need to, go back and reread it if you feel it'll help you. Okay, so the question that we're going to build today's lesson around, and also the tone lesson as well, is write an article for your local newspaper giving your views on one thing you would like to change about the world. So you can pick anything you want to change about the world. Hopefully they will give you interesting questions like this, because they don't always. It might just be something on road safety, or I don't know, more green spaces. I mean, that's quite interesting, but it's just not as interesting as this question. I like this question. Okay, so you can pick anything you want, don't mind, but I just want to stress something to you first about article audiences. So when you're writing a letter, you know the exact person that you're writing to, or you know you're writing to an MP or a teacher or I don't know, the Prime Minister, and you can visualise a version of that person in your head. The thing with the article audiences is they won't tell you a specific group of people to write to. So even in a speech, you know that you're writing it for your year group, or you're writing it for doctors or whoever. Instead, you're going to be given a publication. So can you just make a note of these things for me, please? Just on line paper. So you might be asked to write for a local newspaper, in which case I want you to write for the people of Liverpool. I mean, if you really want to write for the people of Widnes, feel free, but you know Liverpool best, so write for the people of Liverpool. National newspaper, obviously you're writing for the people of Britain. And then, school website, imagine you're writing for St Hilda's students, but also remember what goes on a school website will be read by parents and teachers as well. And then any other website, you just need to be logical about it and imagine who the audience of that website would be. So for example, the Vegan Society website, you're going to be writing for vegans, for example. They wouldn't really ever give you anything that precise, but just in case I didn't want to limit, they could literally give you any publication. They might give you a magazine as well, and you'd have to think about, well, who would read that magazine. If they just say for a magazine, you can pick, you can you've got, as long as you're consistent throughout your article, you can kind of select what group of people you would imagine the magazine being published towards, and who would read it. You could imagine you're writing for a magazine for mums, or a magazine for people who like sports, anything. Okay, you just need to be consistent about it. So whereas with letters and speeches, you'd be writing a list of what a specific person or type of person would be interested in. Here, when you're planning it, for example, your local newspaper, you're going to be thinking about, well, what are the particular interests or priorities of the people of Liverpool? Okay, so at the moment, you could maybe refer to Liverpool winning the league. You could refer to to specific landmarks like Sefton Park. We've talked about this before. Britain. If you're writing for people Britain, you can talk about Brexit, or obviously the pandemic. You can talk about our Prime Minister, and everyone would know who you're talking about. So just make sure that you adapt your content for, it's more like a regional approach. You're thinking about what people in that place would be interested in, and obviously for a website, people who would read that website. Okay, hope that makes sense. Let me know if you have any questions. Right, so first key skill then really is about becoming a journalist. Now, like I said, this is about you having an authoritative voice. However, big caveat, if you're being asked to write for a school website, you don't need to pretend you're a journalist, because many journalists do not write. No journalists write for school websites. So if you're writing for a website, you can write as yourself. The whole point is, though, that you can write as someone else. You don't need to be you. Okay, so we can get into our drama brains. You can pretend that you are somebody else writing this article, whether it's a journalist, if it's for an article or a newspaper or a blog, or whether it's, you're a different type of student or a different person. You can be head of the student council if you want to. You could be a house captain if you want to. Some of you hopefully will be house captains next year. So you could be a year 7 student, you could be a year 13 student. You don't need to be you. And the students who are a bit creative and kind of adopt another voice are the ones who will be more highly rewarded for the content. Okay, so what a journalist would do when they sit down to write an article is they'll ask themselves three key questions, and they are: what do you want your readers to feel? What do you want them to learn? And what do you want them to do? And you need to make sure that across your article, you're answering those 3 questions. Now, I think it's worth bubbling these 3 questions and highlighting them, because when you write them down, because I feel like those 3 questions actually work for a lot. They'll work for your speech and they'll work for your letter as well. It'll just help you to focus on what kind of content you want to be including, and it'll remind you to focus at the end on, well, what do you want their next steps to be? If you're trying to persuade someone to do something or support you, what do you want them to go away and do? Okay, we talked about that when you wrote your speeches for your spoken language. I'm really sad I'm not going to get to see your spoken languages. I might just watch the videos. That's what I'll do. Okay, so make sure you've got those down. Pause now if you need to. So you're going to use those as a springboard to create your arguments. All right, so Another way that you can come across as a professional journalist is to be credible. So to be credible, if you call someone credible, then that means that they're trustworthy. You can trust in them, you can believe them. They're not just on a rant, and you not necessarily convinced they've not done that they've done the research. So there's 4 ways here that you can establish yourself as a credible person. Now this is building on what we already talked about for letters, where we talked about you being confident and authoritative and someone who, again, is trustworthy, who's done the research. We have already talked about that, haven't we? So it's just about like honing that in a journalistic style. So one of the best things you can do as a journalist is establish that you've got a personal experience for whatever you're trying to persuade about. So if, say, you wanted, I'm going to pick racism. Say you wanted to say that you want to change the world so that there's no racism in it. All right. You could establish that you have a personal, direct experience of racism, and that, when I say personal, I don't mean it has to have happened to you. You can have seen it happen to somebody else, or you can have a friend that it's happened to, but some kind of personal worldly experience that gives you a platform to discuss this. Okay. Referencing and quoting others who've got more credibility than you. Now that could just literally be someone's neighbour. Do you remember when we did the Keir Starmer article and they were interviewing his neighbours, weren't they, and indirectly quoting them? They can have more credibility if they were on the scene and they saw something, or obviously you've got your normal, your normal professionals like your doctors or a professor, a member of parliament, someone who might have more status than you do. You need to show you've done research and you need to name your sources. So a good journalist won't just say facts. They'll actually say where the facts are from, so that they can kind of be more credible and prove that they've not just made these up. So I've got some sentence stems for you soon, so you can see how you'd link those in. And then of course you need a professional tone. Remember, if you're writing for a school website, then you can be a student. Okay, I'm going to say that like 10 times because it's really important. It's the only exception to the journalism rule. Okay, so here's some journalistic phrasing. I'm not going to read them out. I just want you to pause the video and jot them down. I'll just explain about back when I was a lowly intern. I was just trying to think of something that would establish that you are a professional journalist, and all journalists start out, or most do, as lowly interns, as kind of doing unpaid work in newspaper offices, magazine offices, and trying to get experience. And what it's the bylines is your name that goes underneath an article, and all interns dream of having bylines and building up bylines so that they've got examples of articles they've written to take to job interviews, etc. So I thought that would be a nice way of talking, like, making you seem like a professional journalist. I did do a week at the BBC researching seagulls and how they're pooping everywhere, and even flying down and attacking a man on his head. Yeah, that was a fun week of my life. So that's where a lot of people will start out. Okay, so just things like sources close to, say, blah blah blah. It just helps to establish you as a credible journalist. So you don't need to use all of those in an article. You've only got 2 to 3 sides and half an hour in the exam, but just thread a few in. That's hard to say. So that you've got that journalistic style. But the best thing you can do to adopt a journalist's voice is to read work by journalists, and that's, I think, what's maybe missing a little bit. So please read opinion articles, because you're being asked to write one, and the best way to establish your own voice as an opinion article writer is to read other people's and kind of soak up key phrases that are often used in the professional style that they use. So I usually recommend the Guardian opinion articles, but I feel like actually I shouldn't be leading you to read a certain type of newspaper. So Google any newspaper, whichever one you want, and then just write opinion article after it, and it will take you directly to their opinion section of their website. Obviously some broadsheet newspapers now you have to pay, don't you, to access, so obviously avoid those unless you want to pay. And obviously bear in mind that if you Google a tabloid, like the Mirror, then you are probably going to experience a lower quality of language than you will do in a broadsheet. So try to do a broadsheet if you can. I think it'll be better preparation for you for your exam. Okay, so that's maybe something you can look at doing over the summer holidays. Maybe you can sign up. You can sign up to certain newspapers to send you like daily articles and things, or just read one while you're having your breakfast. Okay, I'd like you to do some work now. So, other than main notes, what I'd like you to do is do the subheading how to open your article. And I do think based on what we did last year, getting started on an article is sometimes the hardest part. So I've copied this screenshot. This is a real article from The Guardian, sorry, from April this year. Obviously, the opinion that this person is putting across, you can tell by the headline immediately, is that lockdown is not domestic bliss for women, despite what people are saying, and she calls that retro nonsense. So what I would like you to do is, I'll put this on my homework, but if you can annotate it, feel free, but otherwise can you just make a list? Can you just list for me what features you can see in this opening? So think about what's included. So we're thinking about our reading questions now. We analyse, don't we, what a writer says, but also how they say it. I want you to do the same now. Label what's included and how it's written, including the formatting of the article as well. Obviously, this is an online article. So if you can't annotate, just make a list for me. Pause now, get as many as you can. Think about the style and the language used, as well as the formatting and what's said. And then I'll go through some answers with you when you've unpaused. Okay, so did you get is the question. Can you change colour pens and just add on anything that you didn't get? Obviously, this is just one article, and I'm not saying these are the only skills that you can use to open your article, but I think this is a really good one. This is the kind of article I'd really like you to be able to write. So you're always going to start with your headline, and you need to make sure that your headline establishes your opinion very clearly. If it's asking you to give your views, your headline needs to I need to be able to read your headline and go, right, I know this person's views straight away. If you want to, you can leave in your exam, I recommend leaving the headline to the end. And actually what you might do is, as you're writing, a headline might come to you, as you're writing, you think, oh, actually, that'd be a brilliant headline. It's also nice as well if you leave to the end, because you can summarize something you've said in your article and it'll all feel very cohesive because it'll all link together. Okay, so underneath your headline, and you can write that bigger on your page in your exam, obviously you can write your name. Sorry, I've not included that. You're then going to have your stand first. Now your stand first is basically that it's usually a bit bigger than the normal text and smaller than the headline, and it just expands your headline briefly. So it's kind of like like a film's tagline, to sort of summarize in a bit more detail what people will expect to hear from you if they read the rest of the article. So it needs to be quite engaging and captivating. It needs to draw people in. So you've got in this one, you've got some lovely like emotive language, haven't you? That it's tiresome and that women are struggling. So it kind of makes it feel like this means something. This is important. I need to read this article. Look at the vocabulary quality as well. Resurgence of the can women have it all. So rather than saying, people keep talking about whether women can have it all during the coronavirus, try and use those words. And if you are going to start reading opinion articles, just jot down some new vocab that you come across so that you can use it in your own writing. It will make a massive difference for that band 4-5. If you can use vocabulary like that, it is really impressive, and the examiner will be led by it to think this is a student who's got great command of the English language. Okay. Obviously, that rhetoric is basically just, speech that's persuasive speech that's being discussed in the public realm in this case. Okay, so that's your stand first, a summary. Now, stand first are quite difficult, I think, in terms of you've got to say more than your headline, but you don't want to give away too much, and it can't be too long. If you're really struggling in the exam, just don't do one. Like, yes, it's an interesting formatting feature, but as long as you've got your headline and if you write your name underneath, it's going to be very clear to the examiner that you know what an article looks like, even just with that. So please don't feel like you need to waste 5 minutes in your exam thinking of a good stand first. If one comes to you, write it. If it doesn't, just don't worry about it. Okay, so I would really like you to start your article with a personal, relevant story. That's one of the options I'm going to give you in a second. But this one is a great example of it. Yesterday I cleaned the toilet. Now, I'm going to have to do a caveat here about the word yesterday, aren't I? I'm hoping you can see that the reason yesterday works here is because there's a date right above it. So it's very clear when yesterday was, even though you obviously aren't reading it at the time. Well, we're not. We're reading it months later, aren't we? In July. It's July already. If it's a published newspaper, please don't say yesterday. This Eleanor has ruined my lesson. So yesterday I cleaned the toilet, made myself an exquisite toast lunch, and wrote this article. So you can see the tone immediately. Exquisite toast lunch. She's being sarcastic, isn't she? Toast isn't exquisite. It's boring. Well, actually, I really love toast. Toast is great. But you would never call it exquisite. Exquisite is something you'd use for Michelin star restaurant. So she's being sarcastic. She's bigging up her achievements because she made toast for lunch. And the italics there work really well to emphasise that she's suggesting that she's done something amazing, because not only has she cleaned the toilet and made an exquisite toast lunch, she's even written this article. Now, you can't really use italics in handwriting. It's quite difficult. I mean, you can. But it'd be easier if you just underline the word if you want to create that style. Sure, I don't have any kids, but I do have a demanding cat, etc., etc. So we're drawn into this world with her and her experience, and that's a great opening to an opinion article. Please don't start your opinion article with a fact or a hard-hitting argument. Draw people in with the reality of life, because that's what we're all interested in, other people's lives, because we're all super nosy. Okay, make sure you use the first person. I clean the toilet. Now, but just remember that the I doesn't have to be you. You can be someone else. Make sure you talk to your reader, and this is a lovely phrase. What's it like to be a woman who has it all, I hear you ask. So you've got that conversation with your reader. Do use the word you, and imagine them talking to you. It's a really nice idea. And then we've also got the conversational tone here. And that specifically is why I'm lucky. I worked from home for several years, and yes, of course, looking after an animal, blah, 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 blah. So you've got this kind of feeling that she's speaking directly to you in a coffee shop. I realise that's a very specific place, but that's just what I always imagine. I always imagine my journalists speaking to me in coffee shops. Maybe I shouldn't have shared that. Maybe that's weird. I don't know. We've also got a use of humour. So, what's it like to be the woman who has it all, I hear you ask? Oh, it's spectacular. It's eye-opening. It's humbling. She's exaggerating there, isn't she? She's imagining it's like the most amazing thing ever. Oh, wonderful. Those three words to me kind of, I don't know, I just feel like a red carpet kind of situation. Like, oh, darling, it's fantastic. It's amazing being a woman who has it all. So use that humorous tone, and that's what we're going to have a look at in one of our lessons next week. Okay, that's it. There are other good things in here, but as long as I hope you've read it all thoroughly, because if you can adopt this tone and this style and this type of content, even, can you see there where the Handmaid's Tale is underlined? Because obviously she's linking to something that, an article on the Handmaid's Tale, presumably. Drawing on knowledge that your reader would have about other books and other events that have happened in the world is another good thing to include as well. So basically, we're going to try and emulate this. We're going to try and emulate this style. Right, so in terms of your actual content of your opening, you've done your headline, you've done a stand first if you can. Obviously, I've already said that one of your options is to start with a personal story. So if you jot this down. So I've given an example, and I've stuck with the idea of racism. So the one we've just seen, you start with a personal story. This is my favourite way to start. We've definitely talked about this before, but I'm going to give you a few more options as well. So for example, yesterday I was reading my latest obsession when I suddenly realised there was not one main character in the entire series. I immediately put down the book and turned to Twitter, where I found blah, blah, blah. Okay, so you're telling a little story. Make sure the story is relevant to your opinion. Otherwise, why are you telling me that story? Okay, so make sure it builds towards you saying, or the conclusion being a point or one of the arguments that you want to make. You can also start option 2 with someone else's story. And remember, you can make all these up. So for example, I've got a friend, we'll call her Martha. Last week we got chatting about racism, as you do, and she revealed to me, blah, blah, blah. So, you've got that humorous style of saying, we'll call her Martha, because people never use their friends' real names, do they? Or you could use that line about, asking for a friend. Try and use phrases like that are in like the public social media domain that will make people laugh or chuckle or make them feel like you're part of this online dialogue and the way people speak to each other online. That conversational tone, as you do. We got chatting. All right. Option 3, refer to other articles that you've just made up. Okay. So this is, I think, not quite as engaging as the personal stories, but is absolutely a journalistic thing to do. And so in terms of marks, I think this will also lend itself very well to you getting high marks. So some opinion articles will start using as a springboard for the article another writer's article. So it's almost like their opinion article is a response to somebody else's opinion article that they don't agree with. So, for example, people like to do this a lot with Piers Morgan. Piers Morgan writes articles for the Daily Mail, opinion articles. If you can get through all of the mess on the Daily Mail website, it's certainly a good place to see opinion articles. Are very, very opinionated usually. Anyway, a lot of other journalists will then respond to Piers Morgan's articles with their own opinions and sort of say why he was wrong or add to it. So, for example, you may have read Joe Blogg's article this week in which he dismissed racism as blah, 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 according to Joe, and then you'd summarise Joe's argument, and then you'd say why Joe's argument is a load of rubbish, and you'd go on to say what you think is true. Now, you could follow that opening with your own personal story. A personal story can come anywhere in your article, of course. And the reason why this is good is because it draws people into a current discourse, and that means it draws people into what's currently being said about this topic, and that makes people more interested. People don't want FOMO because they've not read about this latest thing that everyone's talking about. So if you can start with this, then you're showing them that you've got something to add to a conversation that's already in play that your reader should want to be interested and involved in. Okay, so you can give that one a go. Make sure you write it down today, even if you don't want to use it today, because it could, you could benefit from it in the future. And again, option 4, you can refer to a recent event. So it doesn't have to be something that you've done or a personal story. It can be a national story or a local story that has stimulated you to write this article, because obviously the exam board have asked you to write the article, but you need to pretend that something's happened that's made you want to write this article. So there is an example of one. I've copied this over from somewhere, sorry, and I can't remember where. Marcus Rashford very recently managed to get a policy overturned, didn't he, to provide children with meals over the holidays. So amazing, just amazing work that he did. And that could stimulate then an article on many things, like the power of people to, power of footballers, power of the public to shape government's decisions, why aren't we doing more to support our poorest children, etc., etc. So that's one example of how you can refer to a recent event. And again, you can make it up. You can say, last week's earthquake devastated, blah, blah, blah. Anything at all you can say, as long as it helps to convincingly support your argument and what you want to say. Okay, so there are your 4 options for how I'd like you to open your article. So I'd like you to have a go at this. I'm going to be very flexible about handing dates because I know that you've got time in school, etc. Right, so I am, sorry, I'm just thinking on the spot. I am going to have to do feedback lesson in the last week regardless, because I don't think you'll have time to get this to me, and I'll have to do Monday and Tuesday's lessons before Monday. So yeah, okay, right, just think aloud. Basically, as long as you get it to me by the last week, I'll be able to take it into account the start of the last week. All right, so here's your question again. So a reminder that you're giving your views on one thing you would like to change about the world. So you do have to pick one thing that you could give, say, 3 arguments for. But remember, I'm not going to ask you to write the whole article. It's local newspaper, so make sure you make it relevant to the people of Liverpool. So I also want you to do is write the opening to your article. I'd like you to use one of those 4 options that I've just given you, and I'd like to see you using the language features that we went through, this credible journalistic voice, the use of conversational style, talking directly to your reader, all of those things. And then we'll develop that next week when we look at tone. Okay, can I say maximum 150 words? You know, you can go beyond your opening story or your opening event a little bit, so that you have, you know, if you can have a practice at sort of using those journalistic phrasings then, and I can give you feedback on those. But you know, I also don't want you writing the whole article, and it's hard to say where the cut-off point would be. So if I say maximum 150 words, then at least that guides you to not write too much. In your exam, they'd only be expecting to write 300 to 400 words. So this is about half maximum of an article. As long as you've had a good practice at using those different skills, I don't mind how long it is. So just send me what you've done, and I'll make sure I've arranged some feedback. So this was my plan when I started this video, but I've just realised I can't do it. So I will make sure that next week, Monday and Tuesday's work is up and ready by Monday morning. I know that some of you are in school 2 days next week, or at least one, so I'll make sure you've got that for flexibility. Monday's lesson will definitely be on tone, and then I can't do the feedback, I've just realised, so that will be in the last week. And whether we do that as a live Zoom or I just do a video like this, we'll have to see. So there'll be something else coming your way for Tuesday's work. After next week then, there won't be any sort of new work on Show My Homework, although apart from the feedback lesson, basically this slide is now a load of rubbish, so let's just ignore it, and I'll get back in touch with you with a more concrete plan next week. The only thing that does still apply actually is the 3rd bullet point. So for those of you who have fallen behind, I'm going to post a separate lesson in the last week which basically lists essential things to catch up on if you can. And when I say essential, I mean it'll be more problematic for you in September if you've not done these specific tasks. I'm going to post all of my resources into the student share so you can access them, and hopefully some of you will be able to catch up then over the summer on some key things. Okay, right, as always, let me know if you have any questions. So just to summarise, I'm asking you to write the opening to the article and send it to me, please. Ideally do it in your pink books, but if you want to type it, that's fine, we'll just print it at a later date. Yeah, and we'll be back next week with some homework. Okay, thanks for your time.